really, in this day and age, a lot of networking is being done online. And I think that really changes the conversation. Hello, and welcome to the Head of the Table. Today at the Head of the Table, we will be discussing networking. I know networking triggers the thought of a big ballroom in a conference or convention center where everyone has name tags on and you don't know anybody. And it can just really overwhelm us. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about some tips and also talking about how in this day and age, networking's really changed. And today I have some notes with me because I thought, what better way to talk through this than with having some notes to kind of guide our conversation, to learn the facts and learn the statistics of where networking is today to leverage that information for ourselves. I'm Nora Biddle, and I started the Head of the Table because I really wanted a platform, a community for people to discuss all of the challenges, both for leadership and how they kind of help their working professionals as leaders navigate a constantly changing environment, and also for working professionals who are aspiring to be leaders, whether within the professional setting or in other areas of their life. So today, networking. Really, in this day and age, a lot of networking is being done online. And I think that really changes the conversation. Networking is always seen as this scary tool that we all have to do. We have to write out the name tag and show up to some random location, and we're not really sure what we're doing or how we're supposed to network. And a lot of times it can really feel transactional, whether you are the leader who's showing up and trying to help working professionals, or if you're the working professional trying to ask for help. And while there are a lot of matching programs where you can have, whether it's at your company or LinkedIn or other connections, or through your university, there's ways to kind of be assigned a mentor or a mentee, but that can still really be challenging, and maybe you don't necessarily have the most positive experiences with that. So today we're going to kind of go through how you can have some positive experiences and talk about how networking doesn't have to be terrifying or anxiety-inducing. So really, I want to talk about how online platforms have created a whole infrastructure for networking. Think LinkedIn, for example. I know that's a really big platform where a lot of users are trying to connect professionally. LinkedIn right now exceeds 1 billion members, which is a lot of people. That's basically around a seventh of the world is on LinkedIn today. And so when you're thinking of networking, it's no longer how do you introduce yourself, but it's looking at algorithmic feeds. It's looking at research. It's looking at, recommendations as being the de facto way that professionals are discovered, all online. So instead of going to a convention center and trying to meet people in the tech field, you are trying to connect with the right people online, which has some pluses and minuses. I think a lot of pluses to that is that it's a lot easier to find people in your field. It's a lot easier to connect with people, but to what extent are you really getting to connect with those people? That's really a challenge. I think also even if you are connecting with people online, really how do you stand out amongst all the other people that now have access to that person or certain people within the field? And as a leader, how do you know who to connect with? How do you know how to help them? If you're getting all of these requests online, it's really hard to form connections. And that's kind of leaving out the bot element of LinkedIn, which, if you're less familiar with that, a bot is really not an actual person trying to connect, but it's someone who's trying to get access to more information for nefarious reasons. And that's just really tricky to try to navigate all of that while online. So LinkedIn has been doing some interesting things, and some other professional platforms have been doing some interesting things looking at AI features, kind of how they can leverage AI. I know every day we all hear about how AI is such a big part of our society, how it's growing, it's going to continue to grow all over the news. In corporate America, AI is being leveraged in a variety of different ways, and it feels kind of daunting. So let's look at how we can kind of leverage AI. So LinkedIn, for example, I know is using AI to search for jobs. So when you go in to type to search for specific positions, maybe you want to apply to, AI is being used to try to connect people with those, which is also really helpful if you are in a position where you are hiring working professionals. So LinkedIn is trying to make those connections a little bit easier. Also, professional searches. So if you're trying to search for certain companies, if you're trying to search for certain skill sets, LinkedIn Learning, for example, AI is used in some of that. LinkedIn Premium now has a feature where it can help you with writing all parts of your profile, writing posts. So it's really helpful to leverage AI as you're trying to utilize LinkedIn. But I think also learning a little bit about how to leverage that is really important. And then, as I've already said, LinkedIn Learning is leveraging AI to kind of see how they can match professionals with certain trainings that maybe would be helpful for them as they're advancing in their careers. Now, that's a lot of information I just threw at you. And AI can seem really great, but at the same time, leveraging it is a little bit of an experiment, and it's up to each person. Personally, I really like LinkedIn Premium. I found it really helpful, but I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to pay for LinkedIn Premium. So if you're not utilizing LinkedIn Premium, there are other forms of AI that you can utilize if you're trying to kind of update your resume, if you're trying to update your profile on LinkedIn. But there's a lot of features that you don't have to have LinkedIn Premium to leverage AI. So, for example, job searches, you can utilize specific words, you can kind of utilize some of the expertise that you have as you're looking for job searches. And I think as AI is utilized more and more, it's going to kind of prompt you throughout that job search. But also, if you are a leader, you're going to want to look at how you are crafting your job postings. Because if AI algorithms are being utilized to advertise jobs, then there's going to be keywords that you're going to want to put in your job posting. There's going to want to be key information that you can help feed the algorithm. And algorithms are tricky. They can lead things in really positive ways. They can lead things in really negative ways. I always think of it of like talk to AI and utilize AI like you were talking to a small child. Because when you are more specific about information, when you try to explain things in a very direct way, AI is going to be able to pick up on that a lot faster. Overall, if you want to leverage AI in 2025, which I highly recommend because AI is only going to be growing in influence, I think now is a great time to jump in, experiment with the resources you see, also using things like ChatGPT to kind of help you as you are looking at how to make posts, looking at how to make connections. I know I definitely leverage generative AI if I'm needing to craft a message, but I'm having a little bit of a challenge getting my head around it. And so it can be a really great way that you don't have to start at a blank page, which is really helpful, particularly as you step into leadership positions, because you just don't have a lot of time. And it's a lot easier to react to something and shape it than it is to stare at a blank page. So I highly recommend diving into kind of AI and generative AI in particular as you're trying to look at LinkedIn, as you're trying to look at how you make those connections. It can really save you a lot of time. And also, I think of it like this, like the way that generative AI works is it kind of pulls together all the information it can gather. So if it's seeing similar messages being drafted a certain way, so I'm not saying AI is reading your messages, just more if it has been fed certain styles of messages, you can utilize that information. So for LinkedIn, that's really powerful because if you're using it to just, kind of describe yourself at the top of your LinkedIn page, it's going to utilize all of the past ones that it's done before, the past information that it's been fed in, and people are going to be posting what's successful. And so you can kind of utilize the algorithms to see what is really speaking to recruiters, what is really speaking to leaders, and what is speaking to other working professionals. Because networking, while it is very helpful to connect with a leader or connect with a mentee, you should also be connecting with people who are at your level to kind of see what else is out there to form relationships. And this is where I think you can add in more of a human element is you can leverage these networks, these platforms online to make connections, but then you have a human connection. You actually find time to really invest in those relationships, whether that's getting a coffee off of LinkedIn, or you are just finding time to regularly connect with colleagues to learn about other areas of their life. I know some people feel comfortable posting more on LinkedIn, some people feel comfortable posting less, but it's really a great way to stay connected with people. And so don't get intimidated by AI, about the online digital element. At the end of the day, this is connecting with other humans. So invest in that. Now that we've talked a little bit about infrastructure and how networking looks particularly different today, not as much necessarily in person or leveraging digital platforms to then meet with someone in person, I also wanted to talk a little bit more about why it matters that you leverage these platforms. So for example, a large-scale, randomized experiment with over 20 million LinkedIn users showed moderately weak ties causally increased job mobility over strong ties. Now, there's a lot of big words in there. If we break it down, what this study is saying, after analyzing over 20 million LinkedIn users, there was a cause relationship of people who were able to make weak ties. So maybe a friend of a friend, a working professional of a colleague that you got connected with on LinkedIn actually helped people's job mobility more so over strong ties. So maybe your direct boss or a close friend that works in the same field. What that means is that a platform like LinkedIn can be leveraged to make connections with people that maybe you don't know as closely, or it's a colleague of a colleague. And that can actually help you in the long run. That can help you find a different job. That can help you get promoted. If we look at job mobility, that's really your ability to move within a field and potentially outside of a field. So if someone is leveraging LinkedIn and making connections, even if they aren't super, super close connections, they actually are going to be a little bit more successful in shifting to different jobs or getting promotions and moving around within their job than someone who has a lot of really, really close relationships. Because when you expand your network, you open yourself up to different opportunities. If you're connected to a friend of a friend on LinkedIn that maybe is in a similar field, maybe they are also an engineer, but they're at a different firm, and you're able to get to know that person a little bit and then find out that their firm is offering a job, you can see if they will refer you. We can talk a little bit more about referrals and what they mean as you're applying for jobs, or you are trying to encourage people to apply for jobs, you're recruiting. But that's super interesting to me because I've always thought about if I can develop really strong relationships with my colleagues, with my superiors in the same field, then I'm obviously going to get opportunities. But the research is showing that if you can make more connections that you don't know as well, you actually have a higher chance of shifting around in your career, which could mean higher pay, could mean different responsibilities, or it could mean a career shift overall. So if you're looking to make a move, keep that in mind. And if you are a recruiter or you're in a position of leadership where you are trying to hire more professionals, you should keep that in mind as well, because that means those people that are randomly trying to connect with you on LinkedIn, they might actually be someone worth hiring. And I think it's pretty clear that when people have more job mobility and they're able to move up at companies, they're able to move to your company, they're going to be a lot happier, because in this economy, being able to receive a higher salary, being able to take on new responsibilities and grow in your career is going to feel really good for most working professionals. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about leveraging LinkedIn and leveraging similar platforms without talking about AI. I wanted to talk about AI to start out because it was the elephant in the room, but AI is not the only part of the conversation when we're looking at leveraging digital platforms to network and advance our careers. A meaningful share of US adults use LinkedIn alongside other platforms. One big element to LinkedIn that I've seen is kind of the content-led personal brand element. And I think I have to discuss personal brand. It's become what I like to call a fuzzword. It's a buzzword that kind of loses meaning. So a buzzword is a really popular word. Think of personal brand, think of networking, content creation. There's a whole host of words that we utilize in our regular vernacular that have kind of lost meaning over time. So what is a personal brand? And how can you actually leverage it on LinkedIn, particularly as we live in the day and age of content creation? A personal brand is really up to you. It's kind of your representation of yourself. It doesn't have to be a super strong marketing, selling yourself, feeling like you're in a transactional situation every time you meet someone new. Personal brand is just who you are and figuring out maybe the right ways in a professional setting to describe yourself, but also it's really a good way to encapsulate your story. And I think it can be a little tricky to find that balance of how do I stay relevant while also making sure that I stay perfectly myself, while also making sure I can then advertise it on LinkedIn. And I feel you. I have definitely been challenged with trying to figure out, how do I post regularly on LinkedIn? How do I come up with things that are new and interesting and conversational? I'm going to start this out by saying you don't need to be a LinkedIn content creator. If you love creating content and you have found a way on LinkedIn to regularly be posting and it brings you great joy and you've found this great personal brand, I love that for you. Not everybody has to be that. So when I think of personal brand, here's a couple of tips. One, you really want to be highlighting your work as a professional. And I can see that that's kind of hard. I know, particularly as a younger female, I wasn't always raised to brag about myself. And that is something that I've had to kind of slowly overcome. And one way that I really think about it is if you've had opportunities for promotions, certificates, maybe you got a new degree, maybe you've been on a work trip that you've really wanted to highlight, maybe you have a huge win that you had with a client or just personally at work and you really want to highlight it. I think there's really tasteful ways to do that. And one way that I get out of my head and don't focus as much about how I'm promoting me. So I think about how this might help someone else. I think about how highlighting this is going to be helpful for whoever I'm working with. It's going to be helpful for other people on LinkedIn. And also, I think there's a really fun way that you can go about this. So for example, I had a work trip and we had a lovely dinner and we took a photo and someone posted something about their trip. And so I took that photo and I posted something similar. I didn't have to completely reinvent the wheel, but part of this is figuring out what actually makes you really excited. I do think that if you're receiving promotions, if you're transitioning jobs, it's a great way to kind of update everyone as to what's going on in your professional life. And also, if you've received certifications, you should be highlighting that because you worked hard to get there. The same thing for any sort of degree that you've received. You've put a lot of time and effort into that, and you should be sharing that with people. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go full-on content creator, but if you do want to go full-on content creator on LinkedIn, those are also still really good things to highlight. I also think we should talk about this from the angle of a leader or a manager. A lot of times we think about how we can personally represent a brand, but when you're in a leadership position or a manager position or a recruiter position, you're representing your company. And that's not to say you aren't if you're a working professional. You still are representing your company. You definitely should be thoughtful as you're crafting things to post online. But as a leader, you can kind of highlight some fun things about your company. Maybe you have a great work-life balance policy. Maybe you have a great culture where you like to, go hiking every Saturday with your colleagues. I think that there's a lot of great ways that you can highlight interesting things to try to get working professionals at your company. Because it's not just how can working professionals be advocating for themselves, but it's also how companies and how leaders can be advocating for themselves. And I think that if we're all showing up onto LinkedIn or other platforms and we're highlighting the best of ourselves, things that we're proud of, I think that will really try to help not only people on LinkedIn try to connect with the right company or to find the right working professional for a job listing. But I think it also creates a really fun environment to be a part of on LinkedIn. In this day and age where there has been a little bit of a downturn in the US economy and a lot of people are searching for jobs, I encourage you to leverage these platforms because not only could you be helping yourself, but you could be helping someone else. As we think about human connection, other people, I really want to highlight some interesting data I found as I was doing my research for this episode. And as much as AI and digital platforms are a huge part of networking now, we actually haven't lost the human connection element. It's more important than ever. When doing some research, I found recruiters still rank employee referrals among the most valuable sources of hire in 2024, benchmarking even as social and job boards continue to grow. In the day and age of AI and digital platforms, referrals are incredibly important. Now, what is a referral? If you're not familiar, it's completely fine. And if you've never given one or received one, also completely fine. This will be an interesting element to the podcast for you. Referral is when someone at a company refers a working professional for a job. I think that that's a particularly helpful element for recruiters because there's someone at the company who is vetted and trusted saying, here is an outside person that we think would benefit the company, that really would help fulfill every element of this job. And a lot of times it'll help you get at least that initial conversation with a recruiter. And the reason that's so helpful as a working professional is because even if that one position doesn't work out, recruiters are trying to fill a whole host of job openings at the company. And so it might help you find the right position. And whether it ends up being not that position or something else, still having someone who's willing to go out on a limb and say, I recommend this person for a position is a great honor and really speaks to the connection that you've built with that person. So I would highly recommend, if you are on LinkedIn, you see a job opening, or you're somewhere else where you see a job opening and you know someone at that company, you should reach out to them and try to seek that referral, because it will help you not necessarily land the job, but it'll help you at least get to the first conversation. It gets your foot in the door to prove that you are the best candidate. And fingers crossed, I'm rooting for you. I'm hoping that it works out. I've definitely used it several times and it's ended up in jobs opportunities for me. And it's also ended up in nothing happening, but that's okay. The other element that I want to talk about for referrals is when you are the person referring. And this is something to just keep in mind. You will have people ask you to refer them for a position, and it is okay to come back to that person and try to highlight what your company is like, if the position is the right fit for them. And hopefully after that conversation, that person has a lot of clarity and is excited and is the right fit. But if they're not, you are doing them a disservice by trying to tell them anything differently. And when you refer someone, like, it is putting your reputation on the line. So if you don't feel like someone's a good fit, that's completely fine to tell them, I don't know if this is the right position for you, but if there's other positions, please reach out to me. Or maybe you know of another position. So referrals can be a little bit tricky, but I think that there's still a really great tool that you can utilize, whether you're someone at a company who's recommending someone or you're the person being recommended. Now, if you're a leader, if you're a manager who is hiring, I know that referrals really can mean a lot. And I would encourage you to try to connect with your reports, try to connect with a variety of people at your company that may know some people. I think that sometimes people can be a little bit shy, or they might not even have awareness that you have a referral program, or they might not really know what that program is. So particularly if managing working professionals, or if you have a lot of connections, I would highly encourage you to try to, in those coffee chats that you have with your mentees or those you're sponsoring in a company, to highlight that program, because if you feel like those people are high performers, then they're probably going to attract other high performers. So I really recommend leveraging referrals as a whole, wherever you are kind of on this networking side, or however you're looking to leverage networking. I highly recommend utilizing referrals because, again, that human connection really just cannot be replaced. Something that I found interesting as I was kind of going through and looking at how algorithms are influencing the job market and networking, there was a Wall Street Journal report that came out that I would recommend people look at. And it highlighted that as applications are getting more automated, employers and candidates are leaning back into relationships and referrals to cut through the noise. I think that we're going to see this renewed emphasis on human connection, on referrals, because while algorithms and generative AI can be really helpful as a tool to network, to find the right candidate, to find the right position, it also can create a lot of noise. And my funny example that I always think of is generative AI will have what's called delusions. And I have utilized AI before. to say, here's my resume, here's a job I'm applying to. Like, can you help me update my resume so that I'm using the right terminology? Because I've been in government, I've been in corporate America. They speak different languages, and using AI can be really helpful in that situation. But I've had AI come up with complete delusions. And what are AI delusions? It will make up like things just so that you seem like a good candidate. And it's simply like a misunderstanding on the AI's part, and it's easily fixed, but it always cracks me up. One in particular that happened was I was applying for a job in corporate America, and it just like straight up lied and had this delusion saying that I had been a vice president of a company. I have never been a vice president of a company. So I do think that as we continue to see AI on these platforms, making those direct ties are going to be really important, because there's going to be so much churning of information, of jobs, of resources, that we still need to remind ourselves that AI and online platforms are a tool, just as a name tag and a ballroom used to be a tool to help us connect. So, what are my top tips? My top tips are: networking is a lot more user-friendly than it used to be, and you shouldn't be intimidated by diving in. Take it one step at a time, and you don't have to be a content creator. Don't worry. 2, leveraging platforms really doesn't have to be okay. So what are my top tips for this episode with networking? 1, networking is a lot more user-friendly than it used to be. So don't be intimidated because it's online or there's use of algorithms, AI, there's some terminology you might be less familiar with. At the end of the day, it's still about the human connection. 2, you don't have to be a content creator unless you really want to be a content creator. You can post about your big wins. You can post about your successes. You can post about your company as a leader. But keep in mind, you don't have to be constantly posting. You don't have to keep up an image of what your day is like every single day on LinkedIn. For those who are doing it, I love that you're excited about doing that and that that's really been a great opportunity for you. Not everyone has to do it, and that's okay. And thirdly, networking is still human-centric. At the end of the day, these platforms, these tools are simply that. They're helping us make those human connections, and I think it really helps take off some of the transactional element and the anxiety around trying to go in and meet a ton of people, because really it's about helping working professionals find the right position for them, the right company to work for or organization. And it's about leaders finding a way to really connect with their mentees, their potential sponsors, and help them grow their company. When you're a leader, your objective is to really develop a succession plan, to develop a growth strategy that ultimately will move past your time at that company. And these tools really can be helpful to do so. Now, next week at the Head of the Table, we're going to be discussing how the Head of the Table has shifted as a role and how the table itself has changed a lot. I know we've seen a lot of shifts in our culture and society over the years, and that's really impacting corporate America. That's impacting a lot of organizations, and we're going to talk about how it's changed and some great ways that we can shift with it, because change can be scary, but it doesn't have to be.